Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This episode is brought to you by The Wellness Paradigm, a holistic health coaching company shifting the way that women understand and heal their bodies. Through bioenergetic testing, functional lab testing, and functional nutrition, we uncover what traditional approaches often overlook, so you can stop guessing, start healing, and finally feel like yourself again. No more one size fits all approaches, just real answers, deep rooted healing, and the clarity and confidence you deserve to feel incredible. It's time to shift the paradigm of women's health. Now, on to our show. Hello, Liz.
Hi, Shannon. I'm so excited to be here with you today.
Me too. Liz is going to bring us some nice, beautiful information about how to live a little bit more aligned with motherhood and business, which I know many people listening are going to value. She is a licensed therapist with 17 years of experience, a mom of three herself, a host of the Thriving Mompreneur podcast, and she helps overwhelmed mompreneurs build businesses that support their lives so they can thrive in motherhood and business. So, Liz, I would love for you to describe a little bit more on all the amazing things you do and kind of how you got started in this.
Yeah, I would love to. Well, thanks so much for having me today. And yeah, so I have been a therapist for 17 years, which sounds like so long when I say it out loud like that. And after I had my oldest son, who's 10, really got interested in perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And so I just got more networked in that community. And then that kind of grew as my motherhood journey developed and just into from everything from preconception through parenting. So worked with a lot of moms with infertility struggles and birth trauma and perinatal and infant loss, and just parenting like in the early years and just how much there is on plates of moms in managing so many things and then trying to take care of themselves too. So that has been a passion of mine. And then a couple years ago, I launched a coaching business to help moms who own businesses because I was finding so many moms have businesses because they kind of started as like, this is something flexible I can do with kids at home. And then sometimes the business kind of takes over and it's hard to figure out how to have a balance that's what you wanted in the first place, to have more time freedom and financial freedom. So just love working with moms to be able to grow a business that supports their life and feels like they can do work that they enjoy, but also be present and engaged with them, with their families, and have time for themselves. So I do coaching, one-to-one coaching, with mom entrepreneurs for that, and that's really fun. And like you said, I have the podcast for the Thriving Mompreneur. So
Yeah, I love that. I think it is so needed. I love that you balance, and I would love for you to talk a little bit on how you kind of weave your therapist background into coaching because we were talking about this earlier. There are many coaches that coach moms who don't really understand the deep nervous system regulation, the deep neural, health that you really need to focus on when you work on this
yeah.
very delicate balance. So I'd love for you to highlight that a little bit.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I've had training in so many different areas as a therapist. Like we have to do continuing ed every year. Um, but the somatic work and like brain body connection stuff has just gotten so much more popular in the last couple of years. And a lot of people are familiar with modalities like EMDR, where
Mhm.
so I'm not trained in EMDR, but I'm trained in brain spotting, which is actually like
Mhm.
a different way to kind of use eye gaze to get at a deeper level of the brain. And so just kind of like starting to understand how this is like all tied together, our mind, our wellness, our mental wellness, how our bodies feel, and seeing that with clients and seeing that in my own life and just figuring out like what things work and make me feel the best has really been a huge part of that too. And just learning, so helping moms figure out like how to manage that because I think we are just so inundated constantly with the to-do list and these messages of trying having to do it all and having to do it all well, and it's so overwhelming to our systems, and I just don't believe that we were like intended to live like that. So helping moms feel find ways where they can like slow down and be able to like take care of themselves without the guilt and the perfectionism and like that cycle that we can get into when we feel like we're not doing enough.
Yep, I feel like I don't really know one mompreneur that hasn't felt that way in some regard.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a lot to navigate. And there's a lot of cultural pressure to be
Mhm.
doing a lot of different things. And I mean, even just the like, there's pressure to for self-care, right? And then we don't really understand what self-care is. Like you said, to me, self-care is like setting healthy boundaries and figuring
Mhm.
out how to regulate your nervous system. But that's not really what we're taught
Yeah.
in society. We're taught like, go get your nails done. Yeah, which is those are great things too, but that's not really going to give you like a long-term baseline that's going to support you feeling the best in your life. So, figuring out how to weave those things in to your life is going to be really important.
Yes, I love that you brought that up because I can't tell you how many times when clients come in and we're talking about self-care and they're like, I don't have time to get my nails done. I don't have time to take a bath 5 times a week. I'm like, whoa,
Yeah,
didn't mention that at all.
right.
I was like, can you do a box breath that takes 30 seconds twice a
Yeah,
day? You know, because that's self-care, you know.
yeah,
You just sit and journal for 2 minutes. It doesn't even have to be five, if you don't have that, like that's self-care,
yeah,
right? But we want to make
yeah,
things bigger, grander, things. I'm sure you use this in a better sense, but I'm just like, it's not always about doing more. It's just about being, right? So if we're not
right.
doing more self-care, like I understand baths and massages and all that is beautiful if that's your thing, great. But
Yeah,
just being with yourself is also just really, I feel like self-care at its root.
yeah. And I talk a lot with people about setting boundaries and how
Yes.
that is a big form of self-care.
You started with that. I was like, yes, girl.
Yes. Yeah. And just really boundaries like on our time and on our energy. And I think like a really clear cut way to kind of like an example of this for moms to understand is I feel like moms are always the ones getting asked to volunteer and do things at the kids' schools
Mhm.
or send in things for for daycare or even just being contacted, right? Like the mom is the first one. And so setting up these boundaries of like around your time and how much you can do those things and how much you want to do them, like choosing the things that you want to do and don't want to do and not spiraling into that guilt shame cycle if you say no. And so I often will do a monthly challenge. Like for the rest of the month, don't say yes to anything isn't already on your calendar,
Mhm.
whether that's like requests from the school or social engagements or whatever, and just see what that feels like to kind of practice saying no and see what it feels like to have that space. Because that's, I think, another piece of just us being inundated is like our schedules are so busy, and then we feel like we have to say yes to everything. And it's it's just a lot. And so really finding ways to set boundaries and then also ways for people who have like a partner to kind of offload some of that or change up the way that dynamic is. So it's not the school calling mom every time somebody's sick. It's might be a little more, can make it a little more balanced.
Yes, I would love for you to talk about how, if somebody has a problem setting boundaries, especially being a business owner, it's very difficult. You feel very like, I have to do this for the clients right away, or else, we kind of make up stories like, oh, they're not going to like me as much if I don't respond, in this way. And it leads to a lot of burnout, when
Yeah.
you are doing it for everybody. So maybe somebody that has problems setting boundaries, maybe doesn't even understand what that truly means. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
How would you maybe gently shift their awareness to, making that seem like it might be something that's impacting their health, their business, their family, and how we would shift kind of away from it? Not from it, but more balanced.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, such a good question. I mean, it's going to be so dependent on everybody's unique circumstances, but really like getting into the mindset stuff around, I think starting with like your priorities and your values. Like I usually have clients do a values assessment. And so looking at and it comes with a list of like 100 values and they're all good things. But if you have to pick your top five, how are you lining your time up with those values? Um, and then working from there, like on the guilt piece, the like overcompensating piece, figuring out ways to, I coach moms on ways to like figure out which things make sense for you to outsource, which things are your priorities, which things don't need to happen, which things it's just our own internal pressure and worry, and really kind of like navigating those situations so that you can figure out like and practicing it. It's like it's a practice because it is uncomfortable. And something I always remind people is like boundaries don't have to be for forever. I think we get in our head like if you set a boundary, then it's going to be like this thing that is there forever, and it doesn't. It can change and shift depending on where you are in your stage of life or your stage of business or just a season of different things happening. And you're allowed to change your mind or make a different decision. So I think giving people that permission can be really helpful, that it doesn't have to be for forever, but maybe for right now. You need to say no to more clients, or you can only spend X number of hours per client, you know, per month, and whatever it is to kind of give you that framework.
I'm glad you said that you can really shift it and change it because I think that's something when people think boundaries, it's like this hard line in the sand. And
Hmm.
no, you might set a boundary in your business. I know I've gone through this. You've probably gone through this where you set a boundary, you're like, I really need to do something. And that doesn't feel good. You try it and
Yeah.
like, you know what? That actually increased my anxiety a little. That really didn't work for me. I explore why,
Hmm.
that maybe was coming up for me. And then I shifted to feel a little bit more like aligned. And an example for me is like having a hard stop. Most of my business coaches have a hard stop at 5. They don't respond anything before, after, whatever. That actually like I tried that. I was like, that doesn't feel good for me. Because at
Yeah.
5:30, like sometimes I only have the option to answer at this time. I'm on calls all
Right.
day and I don't want to leave people hanging. And I was like, and that little softening for me actually felt really good and released a little
Yeah.
pressure. But for other people, they need that hard one and that feels really good for them to have that. So
Yeah.
small example, but something.
Yeah, such a good point. Like it does need to be individualized for your circumstances and what works for you. And I think that comes with a lot of like just self-work of and self-compassion of like what works for me doesn't have to work for other people and vice versa. And I don't have to be like how everybody else is running their business or running their life, or just remembering that everybody's circumstances are different. Because I think we do that like in motherhood, we're constantly comparing ourselves to other people, but like we forget, people's circumstances are different. Their support system might look different, or their financial resources look different, where they outsource more things, or,
Mhm.
or they don't invest the same energy in things that are important to you. And so how they spend their time and what their life looks like is going to be different, and that's okay.
Yes, comparing yourself to other people is, I don't know what the phrase is, but it brings your energy down because we
Hmm.
don't know other people's circumstances. But it's really hard not to, especially, I think just as a mom, period, but then especially a mom business owner, you're like, well, they have 12 kids and they're able to run this amount and
Right.
all of these things. And you're like, you
And
don't understand.
homeschool and,
And
like,
homeschool. And it's like you start feeling like, what's wrong with me, right?
right.
So, what are some of maybe the top 2 or 3 things that people come in with outside of maybe just the traditional, I hate to say traditional, but traditional burnout, or
Hmm.
mom guilt? Like, what are some other things you see that you kind of help clients work through?
I think because I work with a lot of highly ambitious women, which most business owners who are trying to do that with like a young family are pretty ambitious. And they often have like so many ideas and so many things. And ambitious women, like particularly before you become a mother, you're like used to being able to meet all your goals, right? And so then motherhood can hit hard for those like type A high achieving people
Yep.
because you don't have control over things the same way. And then you add on top of like building a business where you're trying to get to these goals that in the past maybe were you were always able to get to those. And now it's just different. Your time and your energy are different and pulled in different directions. So, kind of starting to look at like, what are your priorities? Where do we need to start? How do we focus on like one thing so that you can put your energy into that to work towards your goals without spreading yourself too thin? And and a lot of like that self-compassion piece and understanding like this journey might look a little bit different than kind of trying to reach goals in the past because your mind is a lot more divided. Your attention's a lot more divided.
I think you would probably agree that that's probably one of the biggest things holding women back is like this
Mm-hmm.
journey is different than what I thought it was going to look like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that thought of what they think it should look like in the reality, and there's like this gap, and they keep focusing on this gap, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
and I don't know how you would clinically say that, but it's that pulls women down, right? And I
Yeah.
think it makes them feel constantly bad about themselves that they're not doing enough, they're not enough, traps them in that cycle. So
Yeah, for sure.
if somebody's in something I call a poop loop of, just this like constant, I'm not doing enough, I do more, I burn myself out, and then, it like recirculates, right?
Yeah.
How would you gently stop the poop loop cycle?
Such
It's a very technical clinical
a
term.
funny name.
That, go for it.
Um, yeah, I think it's really like, again, I would go back to like the values assessment with people and kind of like, okay, what are your values? And then really doing like a hard audit on how you're spending your time and is your time lining up with your values? And so being able to really look at um, are the hours in the day that you're spending building your business, is that really getting you to the goals that you want of like, financial freedom or more time with your family or whatever to be able to travel. And chances are, if you're just like in this constant, like burning the candle at both ends, you're not going to be able to get to those things. So, kind of scaling back, looking at what do we need to prioritize? What are the money making actions in your business that we really need to focus on? What things can you outsource in other places? And what things are most important for you to do so that you can really use your energy well? And and then putting some time frames on like what your schedule looks like, what hours you're working, what time you want. My business coach always says like she works a 3-day work week because she has a lot of hobbies, and otherwise she would just like let it, her work time just spread out. And I know I've been in that cycle. Like any hour that my kids are in school, I'm like, I could be working on this. So giving yourself, building in some other things to be able to take those breaks or to do other things that you want to do. And sometimes that looks like doing those things first. Because if you're like me, you're like, well, I'll rest when I'm done, the checklist, right? Um, and
Hmm.
then the checklist is never done. So you never rest.
Never done.
So prioritizing those things first. Or I sometimes have to set timers and will like stop to take walks with my dog and
Mhm.
things like that so that I'm like getting up and giving myself those boundaries in other ways.
Yeah, I was one of those people and many of my clients where it's like, I'll rest when I'm done with this and then it never ends. The checklist
Right.
never ends. And what I tell my clients is like you can wait till that or your body's going to tell you now and
Yeah.
you're gonna start seeing it suffer in all the other areas. Like you make the choice, either you you do it now or it will remind you to slow down and
Yeah.
it's not in a fun way always.
Yeah.
Many, 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 many of our clients have like, true burnout, like their adrenals are legitimately tanked. Like,
Yeah.
they start seeing their health show up as we had talked about this, thyroid disorders, hormone dysregulation. Suddenly they develop gut issues or, the hair's falling out or they
Yeah.
can't wake up in the morning and they're like, something's wrong with me. I just need to work harder. I'm just
Yeah.
lazy. It's like, no, girl, your body is telling you something. It's telling you to slow down. You're like, that can't be the answer. That's not the answer.
Yeah.
That can't, it has
Right.
to be something else. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. Because we're in such like an achieving mindset of like, well, we just got to do more, find the right thing.
Oh,
And that's so like culturally influenced, I think. And
yeah.
yeah.
It's a tough one. So I think, as somebody who has two businesses, right? A
Mhm.
podcast, obviously three kids, right? What would you say are some like non-negotiables that you take in your life to kind of balance all of this while staying, grounded as much as you can, healthy?
Yeah, such a good question. Gosh. So I am definitely like really like to focus on prioritizing my like health and wellness. And bedtime is a big deal for me. Like I am, and even in college, I never like pulled all-nighters to study for exams. That's just like not my personality. But am pretty strict about like not doing work in the evenings because for one, I just don't have the brain capacity, and for two, like I need the sleep. Um,
Mhm.
and as I've gotten older and found that I'm more sensitive to things like caffeine and sugar and stuff like even and alcohol, like sleep is like so important and kind of really looking at like which things impact my sleep because that just changes the whole day. Really having like prioritizing working out and finding ways to like move my body that feel good in whatever season. That's really changed over the course of like before I was a mom and in different stages of being a mom. I remember I used to go to like body pump classes at like 8 p.m. after I had my first, after he would go to bed. And now I'm like, the thought of going out to the gym at 8 p.m. is
Literally.
miserable. Or like 5:30 in the morning or something. But, adjusting to what works for me and working out at home with 30-minute workouts and how much time can I put into it, but really making sure that I get up and do that the days that I get up and do that before my kids are up just feel so much better. The whole day is better. So prioritizing those things and nutrition and water and like kind of the basics that we forget about when we get really busy and making sure that I'm doing those things as just part of I don't even think of those as like I'm doing those things for like my own self-care as much, but like just that's the baseline. Like I need those things to just be at the baseline, like the self-care or whatever other things I'm going to do for me special comes on top of that.
Okay, I'm glad you said that because I think it's very funny when, obviously we work a lot with clients' nutrition, right?
Hmm.
Habits, things like that. Um, but people view that as their self-care. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not your self-care. That's just staying alive,
Yeah, right.
like
That's just like being a human.
being a human. Like, let's shift how we really think, because if that's your self-care, like, we need to have some other conversations,
Yeah.
because this is just keeping you functioning not even, I mean, just at a baseline, right? And we want to be
Right.
optimal for sure. And yes, it does take a little bit of time sometimes to plan
Yeah.
meals or, not drive through the drive-through if that's your go-to, but that's not that really shouldn't count as your level of self-care.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's why it feels like that, right? Because women invest so much energy in like the meal planning and the meal prepping and the, working out and that a lot of all or nothing mindset too. And that's where we get stuck. And I've found myself in that, those patterns too, and have tried a lot of different things to kind of figure out what works for me in my life that's actually sustainable. Um, but I think that we get into that all or nothing of like, well, if I'm not getting up to the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, 5 days a week, then I might as well not go at all. No, like you could take a
What?
10-minute walk 3 times a week, and that's way better than doing nothing. So kind of shifting those mental blocks around that, because that's an easy pattern for women to get stuck into.
Oh, I mean, I'd probably say 70%, if not 80% of our clients have that,
Yeah.
and it's tough. And I would love to know kind of some ways that you help shift clients out of it because I think that's something that really brings people down. It's like, yeah, if I can't do all of it, I will do none of it. And then it creeps into their business, it creeps into how they are as a
Yeah.
mom, their relationships, and it's like finding that healthy balance in the middle is one of the most powerful things I think you can do as a mom and business owner. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, I'd love to hear.
Yeah. So much mindset work there. And that is definitely a process to kind of learn what works and what's okay for you in seasons, but like really giving permission to change your mind, like we said about boundaries of like, or adjust things that you're not committing to like some plan for the rest of your life. And so you can change in different seasons of your life how you do things. I think it's a lot about just kind of taking those first small steps and seeing kind of like, okay, how does this feel to do that? Like, can we just start with those first couple of small steps of 3 10-minute walks a week and build from that? Like, I would much rather adjust the expectations to be a little bit more realistic so that you can get that momentum and feel that success of doing it and then be able to build up from there. Um, because just like this is why New Year's resolutions don't work, right? Because people go into it like, well, I'm gonna start going to the gym 5 days a week. When you're going zero, like that's a totally unrealistic expectation. But like, okay, let's start with one, and one is better than nothing. Um, so kind of looking for those ways to weave in smaller goals and to make it feel like more natural and like what you like to do. Like I don't like to cook, so meal planning and meal prepping is not enjoyable to me. Thankfully, my husband has taken that over and he does that in our family. Um, because I do other things that are more my strength. Um, so finding ways to like make nutrition easy or to make it just like simple if that's not your thing. If you like cooking, then being putting your energy into that and maybe not as much into some of the other figuring out how to map out some of the other habits.
Yeah. My husband, thank goodness. So I mean, prepper too. Uh, Yep. Yeah, I'm glad you said that though. I think that's a big thing holding people back is they want to go from 0 to 100, but they haven't even,
Mhm.
it's what, running before you're walking, and then they feel bad about themselves, right? Then it's
Right.
this guilt cycle, right? It's like, well, what's wrong with me? I can't stay committed. I guess I'm just never, I'm always going to be whatever it is. I'm always going to be this weight. I'm always going to do this in my business. I'm always, it's like, well, no, you're just skipping a few things in between. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like building small wins is a big one. I love the book like Atomic Habits is a big
Yeah.
one. It's like can you focus on being 1% better every day, right? Not
Yeah.
100% better. That's the one small thing you can do today to move yourself one step forward, not
Yeah.
20, because then if it's 20, I like to use the analogy, it's like baking a cake. It's like you can bake the cake at 375 for, 50 minutes and it turns out perfect, or you can bake the cake at 500 for half the time and it probably gets burnt and it doesn't taste
Yes.
right. And then you have to start over.
Right. Because we
Right.
get impatient. We get impatient.
Yep.
Sure. For sure.
I think one thing I'd love to tap on before we kind of wrap up is the identity of
Mm,
being a mom, being a business owner, especially maybe for people that are newer moms or newer business owners. I know they're kind of different sides of the spectrum, but your identity shifts in this a lot. And I feel like
for
I see a
sure.
lot of clients struggle in that. So I would love to hear
Yeah.
your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, I think, yes, our identity shifts a lot when we become moms because your entire focus of what you prioritize before is different, right? And again, like and you probably do too, work with a lot of high achieving women. And so when you're used to being able to kind of control things and manage your time really well and meet all these goals, and then you have a baby that you're literally like, I have no control over this thing. Like, I can't even get out the door to get to a doctor's appointment on time because I have no control over their crying and their pooping and all the things. That can be so hard for us as women to be able to like process that it's not about us. It's like this lesson of shaping us into like, nope, we can't control everything. And what are we going to do with that instead of the turning the frustration on ourselves? Like, why can't I just get out the door on time like other people can or whatever? Um, so just starting to understand that, like, yeah, it is going to be different, but you don't have to lose yourself in motherhood. Like, you're still a person yourself, and that's really important for your own well-being. And I think it's a really good role model to your kids to be able to see that you're not just mom, that you have a life outside of that. And so when it feels really hard to prioritize some of those other things, or it feels like too much effort to step away from our kids to do the things that we like to do, remembering how important that is for our well-being, but also really for modeling for our kids. And especially for if you have a daughter, like, would you want them to be doing that when they're a mom? Probably not. So we need to teach them from by example. Um, so I think that's a really important piece of it. Um, and I think it makes it easier to be present with your kids when you have something else outside of um, just just being mom. Not that just being a mom, there's nothing wrong with that, but having that identity of like your own interests, friends, hobbies, whatever it is, um, so that your kids know that they're not like the ultimate. The world doesn't revolve around them. I think that's good lessons for them to learn. Um, and as a business owner, then I feel like that's hard because it depends on like kind of who else is around you. I feel like a lot of my friends are not entrepreneurs. I have a lot of people I've met through being an entrepreneur, the networking and stuff, but like my close friends are not. And so it just is a different mindset to be in. And it is kind of um it's like you said, like the list is always there. You're always sort of striving for something, and that is a different place to be in. And so kind of understanding what that looks like, and then giving yourself opportunities to be surrounded by other people who are in that so that you feel that you're not alone and there are other people kind of going through that. And I think getting support like from coaches and things like that can be really helpful for people who have experienced these things and have found some ways that do work that can then help you get to that point. But it's hard. It's hard to like navigate it all and um it's a lot, but it is important to kind of like remember that you're a person outside of just of those things. Those are parts of you, but not all of you.
Parts of you, but not all of you, for sure. I love that. Thank you so much, Liz, for sharing all of your beautiful wisdom. And, I think if somebody wanted to connect with you or find you, please let us know where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram. I'm just at Liz Kent Coaching. Um, and my website is also lizkentcoaching.com. So those are the kind of the best ways to find me. You can follow my podcast, The Thriving Mompreneurs, on Apple and Spotify and iHeartRadio. And yeah, I do a couple free mini coaching sessions every month, um, just to kind of help moms get that first step to clarity on what their goal, moving towards their goals so that they can really thrive in their business and motherhood. So I would love to give a couple of those away to listeners, from your show.
Yeah, I will definitely, if you want to make sure to send me the link for to book that,
Yeah.
put her website down below and her Instagram as well. So you guys can go find her and connect. And if you found this really helpful, I'd love to know. Either well, first, we would love a review if possible. It definitely helps our, ratings reach more people. But also, if you want to shoot Liz or me a DM, it's always helpful to hear that this really resonated with you guys.
Yes.
So, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you on the next show. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Liz.
Thank you for having me.